communication. In the second meeting, we discussed about globalization and communication, the role of communication in globalization, and how we can maximize our skills in communication to create a globally globally competitive, probably in the global competition, specifically that we contribute also to the success of our nation. So this evening, we are going to talk about local and global communication in multicultural settings. And we only have one specific goal for tonight. Okay, so let me just move to our first. Okay, so our objective is to cite examples on how to enhance one's ability to communicate with people from diverse culture. Okay, so just one specific example on how to enhance one's abilities or one's ability to communicate with people from diverse cultures. Last time we talked about the different barriers of communication. If you could still remember, we talked about cultural relativism, right? If you can still remember, can you give me a specific example wherein cultural relativism is manifested in our communication? Can you give me one example? When does cultural relativism happen? When does it happen? Aisel, go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Hello, good evening.
Cultural relativism happens when you respect other cultures and beliefs. For example, you are respecting the race of other countries, like Black American people are respect their color, their skin color. That's it. Cultural relativism.
Okay, thank you so much, Aisel. So showing respect to one's differences or one's individualities. In the context of communication barrier, when does cultural relativism become a barrier to effective communication? Yes, Denise? Please unmute your mic. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah, sure. Okay, you're good to go.
According to your lesson, the past lecture, you said judge.
I think the connection isn't so good. You're coming on my end intermittently.
Cultural relativism
Your
is a
voice,
barrier when
Denise isn't so clear.
you judge other people, you judge other races, are based on your own culture.
Okay, very good, Denise. You nailed it. So that's the basic explanation of cultural relativism, judging others based on your own culture. Mean to say your own biases, your own prejudices. If you judge someone because of his being different to you, that is cultural relativism. But of course, Aisel said that for us to be able to avoid cultural relativism, we need to respect one another, regardless of skin color, regardless of creed, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of economic status, regardless of gender, etc., etc. If we use these kind of respect on that person, then cultural relativism is being avoided, right? So thank you so much, Denise, for sharing that. And of course, other barriers to effective communication is your inability to speak a specific language or lack of knowledge on a specific language. Of course, this is something also that it's hard to avoid, especially if we cannot speak someone's language that fluently. Misunderstanding can really occur. And that alone is also a barrier to effective communication. But then we're given some tips on how to improve ourselves in such a way that we would be able to be a global communicator in a culturally diverse society. So nowadays, we oftentimes hear the word multiculturalism, right? Multiculturalism, diverse cultures. And tonight, we will strengthen our understanding on diverse cultures, multiculturalism, and how we can enhance our ability to communicate with people from diverse cultures. Okay, so let's start with engaging by putting things in the right perspective. Okay, first things first. I am interested in interacting with people who are both like me and different from me. Okay? Can you use the chat box in showing your agreement? If you agree, you say yes. If you do not agree, you say no. If you are, well, maybe, you can say maybe. Okay, in between. If you are probably half and half, agreeing with the statement. So you can write yes if you believe that you do this every time, no if you don't do this at all, and then maybe if you do it sometimes. Again, let's check your statements in the chat box. I am interested in interacting with people who are both like me and different from me. Please type your answers in the chat box. Okay, ayan. Thank you so much. Now we have here, yes, a lot of yes. Yes, we have maybe. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna ask the person probably who has or who belongs to the minority. Majority answered yes. Okay, but we have a couple of participants here, or students here, who said maybe and sometimes. May I ask Georgeline, why was your response maybe? Why is it maybe? I am interested in interacting with people who are both like me and different from me.
Sir,
Yes, Georgeline?
no, I don't know, sir.
You do not know, you just made a guess. Okay, you
Look,
just made a guess. Yeah, it's fine, no problem. Okay. But I believe Georgeline is a bit shy. Maybe there are times, actually, like me, I would answer also maybe. There are times when I'm in the mood of being with different types of people, but there are times also when I feel like joining only the common circle, right? But I've noticed that many here have actually answered yes. May I ask those who answered yes? Let me check on Al Peter. Okay, Al Peter, can you tell me why you answered yes? It seems that
Yes,
Al Peter is a social butterfly because he can actually mingle with both worlds, your own
yes,
world and the outside world. So please tell me, Peter, why did you choose yes? Please
yes,
open your
sir.
camera.
Yes, sir. Because I like it, to interact different person and different personality, sir.
Okay. Do you have many friends?
Yes, sir. Many
Mm.
girls.
So you have friends who are introverts and you also have friends who are extroverts.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow, it's good. I mean, well, it takes a lot of skills in being able to relate with people in both worlds, right? Well, there are people who are sociable, who can easily connect with other people, but there are also people who are a bit, reserved. They don't talk a lot. But you being able to bridge, these two groups, I think it's something. So, right, great. Thank you so much. And someone raised his hand. I think it's Philip. May I hear from Philip? Philip raised his hand and he said sometimes. So please share with me, why did you choose sometimes?
Because, sir, I have many friends, sir, but I don't trust anyone, sir. Sorry, sir.
You don't trust anyone. I see. Maybe you have experienced being betrayed by
Since
a friend. Mm-hmm.
since before I figured in PCC, sir.
I see. Sige. Thank you so much, John Philip. Na malalim po ang hugot ni John Philip. Anyways, let's proceed to the second statement here. The second is, I am sensitive to the concerns of all minority and majority groups in our multicultural country. Again, I am sensitive to the concerns of all the minority and majority groups in our multicultural country. Again, we have three choices: yes, no, and maybe. Please type your responses on the chat box. We have yes from Al Peter. Kenan also answered yes. Glyza, yes. What else? Okay, we only have three responses. Karen, Hope, yes. Okay, very nice. Okay, Shella is also yes. Logi is yes. Wow. It seems that all of you are really makamasa. You are for people because you don't only consider your own needs, but also the needs of others. Okay, that's so nice. That's good. We really want teachers who think of others more than they think of themselves. Of course, we are human beings. We have our own needs, personal needs. But of course, for us to be able to live in a harmonious and peaceful world, we need to be able to consider also others, putting ourselves in the shoes of other people. Okay, thank you so much for the responses. Third, I can sense when persons from other cultures seem not to understand me or get confused by my actions. We're talking here not only of people in other countries, but people whom you are interacting with day in and day out, outside of your circle or even inside of your circle. So please type your responses in the chat box. Okay, we have here responses from, okay, yes from Melchori, yes from Shella, Kate, yes, Isel, yes, Senilin S, Shella S, yes. We also have Aprilin, yes. Al Peter, yes. Kenan, yes. Okay, yes. Wow. All of you answered yes, and it's quite impressive. You're displaying here a kind of personality that is, really makamasa for the people. May I ask one here? Maybe tell me, Pamela, a particular situation where you manifest or where you manifested this kind of behavior, sensing a person from other culture that they don't understand you or that they are confused with your action. Can you share an experience? Did you have a specific experience relative to this statement? Have you ever experienced that? Oh, I've noticed that this guy or this girl is, having trouble interacting. I think it happens to us sometimes. Have you experienced this feeling of being out of place? Like attending a party and then realizing that you don't fit in, that you're OP, out of place. Have you experienced that? How many of you have experienced that? Okay, John Philip said yes. And in that particular situation, what did you do? What do you do when you feel like you're out of place? Yes, Aprilin.
You have this feeling of self-pity, sir,
Okay,
that
so
you want to belong in that group.
yeah, you feel like, oh, if there is only a delete button, I would have deleted myself. Or if there is just this invisible button, I would just have clicked it so that I would disappear and no one will notice it, right? You feel that. Sometimes sometimes it could happen in family reunions, right? Or sometimes in alumni homecoming. Yeah, I do not know how many of you here have attended alumni homecoming or family reunion or gathering of, section bayabas, no? Something like that. So maybe you have experienced those events in your lives and you felt like you became out of place or OP. So, and I understand the feeling. I did have a fair share of experiences when I felt in the same situation. What did you do? Can you tell me how you handled the situation gracefully? How did you handle it? Who can share? How did you handle the situation? You can type, actually, if you don't want to express your answers orally, we have a chat box button here. I mean, we have a chat box feature. You can always type in your responses in the chat box so that I'd be able to appreciate your responses. That would be part of your participation as well. According to Denise, staying quiet until someone makes the first move. Okay, just being silent. Okay, so maybe very typical. Well, the reason why you become OP, maybe one is that you're shy, or secondly, you feel embarrassed, or it's just that you feel like you don't fit in. You don't know when to begin a conversation, right? So that's one thing that probably, hampers us from communicating. Okay, what about Kate Justin? Please share your response.
Personally, sir, for me, I'm just trying to like start a conversation or start something to talk about with,
Okay.
just to fit in with the group, or
Okay, that's great. We call it small talk. So
yes,
you can start with a small talk. What is a small talk? A small talk is just a casual talk, like asking for, oh, the weather today is fine. Wow, you're wearing a nice dress. I like that color. So these are like small talks that you can begin with. I think it's very important to break the ice. I really appreciate that, Kate Justin. I mean, keeping quiet can also be a strategy, but it won't help you overcome the situation of being out of place. I really like that you're starting to begin with a small talk with someone, opening up a conversation, asking about time. What time is it now? So maybe you can begin the conversation with that, just asking for time. Or perhaps you can talk about the weather, you can have a toast or something like that. Right? So these are important icebreaker, if I may say, to break the monotony of, well, silence can be deafening. And if you will be staying there for the whole day, I think you would not be able to survive for 8 hours not talking to anyone, right? Unless you're a foodie and you can eat everything that is being served there. But again, not having a conversation with anyone is probably the most difficult thing to handle, especially in a group of people, such as in a party, right? So that's great. Good. Next statement is, I have no fear communicating with persons from both minor and major cultural groups. I'm talking here about, well, when we're dealing with cultures, probably minority means like the Igorots, like the Badjaus, okay? Of course, the majority, we belong to the majority. Now here in Cabancalan City, people in the Bukidnon Carolanos, okay? Those people living, the natives of Carolan, are actually considered as minority now. So how do you communicate with them? Do you have difficulty communicating with this group of people? Like, for instance, the LGBTQ, okay, they belong to the minority, for example. Of course, the general population belongs to the majority. So if your answer is yes, let me check. You can answer yes, no, and maybe. Do you have difficulty, or do you have, is it easy for you to communicate? I have no fear. According to Kenna, no fear. Kate, maybe. Okay, sometimes Logi. Sometimes it's not part of the options. I only said yes, no, maybe. Okay, Merly, yes. John is yes. Karen, maybe. John Philip, yes, with an explanation. Wow. Mary Grace, no. Melanie, yes, maybe yes. Okay. And then so on and so forth. Okay, thank you. Al Peter said it in all caps. No! With that strong emotion. Okay, maybe. Thank you so much. Okay, I really appreciated your responses, but I would like to comment some of your responses. Actually, in the use of social media, we follow certain etiquette, right? We have netiquette actually, and there is specific meaning in everything that we write. If we write it in small caps, the feeling is just the usual one. If you type it or if you key in your answer in all capital letters in an uppercase letter, it means that your emotion is really strong. So if you don't want to be misinterpreted, please type it in the normal way. I would really appreciate you making use of the proper mechanics in writing. You should begin your answer in a capital or in a low uppercase with the rest of the words in lowercase and ends with a period. So I think that can be a good practice for you to improve your writing as well. And one thing that I would like also to remind you is to learn to follow instructions. One day in 4 years' time, when you finish your 4-year course here at FBC, you will be taking the licensure examination for teachers. If you want to pass, you have to follow the instruction. One of the regional directors advised us jokingly that if only all test takers followed the instructions, they would definitely pass, not just pass the examination, but they would definitely like perfect it, maybe perfect the examination. Why? Because the instructions say choose the correct answer. So which means that if you follow it, then you would be able to get a perfect response. That's why when the instruction is yes, no, maybe, do not give me a different response, because although I would say that we're talking about multiculturalism or we're talking about diversity here, but we have here standards also to follow. And still, we need to follow that standard because that's what makes the world go round. So it's a practice for you to listen carefully, at the same time to follow what the instruction says, and at the same time to make use of the different elements in the chat for us to be able to express our thoughts. And again, every word that we type has a meaning. It can be a strong emotion or just a usual reaction depending on how you write it. And I want you to observe proper writing because online, it's so hard to interpret, even with the use of the emojis, right? Of the smiley, because sometimes we could be misinterpreted. Many of us are fond of using like kissing, sending someone with a kiss, even if you are not intimately involved with that person. So that could be misinterpreted. So in communication, again, we have to be very careful, especially when we are sending a message to the person. And if we want that person to understand us, the kind of message that we want to convey to that person, we have to be specific, we have to be concise, and at the same time, we have to be direct to the point, especially with our responses. Okay, that's part of our improvement. Now, let me share with you this statement from Confucius. He said that human beings draw close to one another by their common nature, but habits and customs keep them apart. What do you think, or what is your idea on this statement? Human beings draw close to one another by their common nature, but habits and customs keep them apart. I think, someone here has an idea. What do you mean by this? We become closer with our common nature, but sometimes habits and customs keep us apart. Okay, from Denise, I hope your connection will cooperate with you this time. So you're now acknowledged. Please open your mic.
I think common nature is our interest po. Human beings draw close to one another by their interest, but habits and customs, which is, I think, a personality, keep them apart. The difference with our personality po.
Okay, so which means that you do not have friends whose personalities are different from you.
Yes po.
Okay. Well, that's Confucius. Maybe it's different from you, right? So according to Confucius, you're saying that people become only close when they have common interests, but they
Yes,
sort of well, they separate when the personalities already clash. Okay, so
Yes
I would
po.
accept that. Thank you so much, Denise. Kate here has something to share.
Uh, in my point of view, sir, human beings draw close to one another by their common nature. Uh, we already knew that we have these similarities, maybe in personality or in hobbies as well,
Mhm.
interests, but habits and customs keep them apart. For me, it's the differences in culture or our values, our differences with our moral values or either our practices in everyday of our lives.
Okay, thank you so much, Kate. That's a very good answer, right? So, we can put this in this perspective. When you go abroad one day, let's say, you go to the US, for example. So there are a lot of people there from different walks of life, not just that, but different races. So we have Indians, Indonesians, Americans, British, right? It doesn't mean that we are, we come from different races or different cultures. We cannot be friends because, like what you said, Kate, when all of these people like skiing, for example, or like swimming, they can go together and swim, right? But it doesn't mean that I would also pray like how the Muslims pray, because I have my own way of praying. So, which means that we do not probably practice the same religions, but we can meet halfway in some ways. For example, interests and hobbies. When I was in Japan, I happened to um, meet people from other countries as well. And that time, I had friends from Poland, I had friends from France, and we like to go to onsen. Onsen is the hot spring. I do not know if you're familiar with it, but if you have been to Mambukal, you would see that steaming water. That's what they call hot spring or onsen. We really love onsen because in Japan it's cold, so you want to take a dip in the warm water, especially in winter. Every weekend we would go there, but during weekdays we have our own business, so they go with their usual friends, also with my own friends, but on weekends we go together on the same place. I think that is a classic example of the statement from Confucius that we can be together because we like doing this thing, but it doesn't mean that we follow, although it can happen at times that one person would follow someone's custom or habit, but it doesn't mean that we follow also our individual habits. Because smoking, for example, is a different story, right? It doesn't mean that both of us like photography, we go together, like taking pictures, but it doesn't mean that you will follow your friend who is smoking as his habit. That's a different story. So that is a classic example. And I think in here, it says that we can be friends with anyone as long as we have common interests. However, it doesn't mean that we follow everything that our friends do because, there's no more diversity in there. Respect only occurs when you respect someone's difference. He can go his own ways. You can be friends at some point, but he can also go with his own ways. Not the bad ways, because of course, if you know that it's bad, you can always give advice to the person if he or she is truly your friend. But that's a different story because sometimes interfering someone's life may also cause conflict between and among friends. So it's good that we value respect, and that's one thing that we should start our friendship on. That should be the foundation of the friendship, the common respect that we show to each other. Thank you. Let's talk about intercultural communication. I think this is something very relevant. The statement of Confucius here mirrors the kind of behavior that we want to manifest when we are in an international setting. So international setting talks about different people from different, cultural backgrounds, right? Philippines is a country that is composed of many islands and islets. And every island we have in the country has people, of course, right? And every group of people has or have their own cultures and also their habits, their customs, etc., etc. So how do we cultivate and how do we nurture our skills in multiculturalism, much more on the effective communication in a diverse culture? So we have here some statements or some tips. Interaction to interaction with people from diverse culture from Jan 1998. This is the definition of intercultural communication. That's interaction to interaction with people from diverse cultures. Have you ever experienced communicating with someone from different countries? Right now, because of Facebook, perhaps, we have also like widened our social circle. Many of us have been, well, Filipinos are like this. Most of us are very lenient when it comes to accepting friends, even if that person is someone that you're not familiar about. Oh, we have a common friend. We have a mutual friend. Well, I can add this guy or this girl, right? We have that kind of mindset. Or sometimes we want to add someone who sounds foreigner on our probably on our friends list. So we have that kind of behavior. But of course, generally, I'm not saying that we are doing this because I know that some of us are not also doing this, which is not safe, of course. But going back to intercultural communication, when you communicate with someone from different cultures, when you join national trainings, for example, or national engagements or webinars, you would meet people from across the Philippines, coming from the different islands of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And you would see how diverse personalities are. And sometimes misunderstanding of this diversity may cause miscommunication and conflict. Just imagine how different people are in Manila, how different people are in Mindanao, and how different people are in Visayas. Just looking into the diversity that we have in the Philippines, right? So that's how difficult it is to communicate. Even in Negros Occidental, people from San Carlos and people from Hinubaan, people from Bacolod and from Cabancalan, when we converge in one place, still we experience cultural differences, even in the way we speak. Probably our Hiligaynon, we speak Hiligaynon. Majority of people in Negros Occidental speak Hiligaynon, but probably our intonation may differ, right? And the intonation of Hiligaynon in Ilog may sound a little bit unique compared to the Hiligaynon in Cabancalan. Or if you hear Hiligaynon in Bacolod, you seem like, oh, it sounds like they're singing. Makadto, kasubong, sila. So it sounds like different. And sometimes we cannot avoid but smile, right? So we have that kind of initial reaction. But knowing the differences of the cultures of the different people in Negros Island, that would make us understand that what is really important for us to establish effective communication or to arrive at effective communication, first is to establish respect. I was in the church last Sunday. I was attending the what do you call this? The daily mass, and then there was this lady. She's also a colleague at the SDO of Cabancalan City, who's a teacher for the deaf, and she made all the sign language while the priest or while bishop was conducting his homily. And these three people behind me were laughing at the teacher because when you are a deaf mute teacher, you have to show not only your hand gestures. Have you seen them like do the sign language? Sometimes they complement it with facial expressions, right? And sometimes their facial expression can look funny, especially for those who do not understand them. But I felt the lady and I really respect her. And it made me feel sick seeing those women and her two children. Actually, the mother was the one really prodding on, like, oh, look at her. She's doing that. And I was like, I turned my back actually and I looked at them, at the three of them, because I got pissed off. I'm sorry. I was in the church, but I got disappointed. I got pissed off. So I looked at them, not in a friendly eye, not in friendly eyes, but I was really disappointed. You know, that kind of situation can occur if that is sheer ignorance, right? You are ignorant of the fact that that lady was not doing it to entertain you. She's doing it to make the deaf mute understand the gospel. And just laughing at the lady exerting her effort to make the deaf mute understand it, it's horrible. It's too much to bear, you know. And I couldn't imagine if the world is like this, ignorant. That is why it's very important to cultivate respect. And how can we do that? To understand that people come from diverse cultures. And when we interact, it's not just about words that we say. Even our action is a sign of interaction. If you laugh at someone because someone is different, you are sending a wrong message. You are communicating in a wrong message, which is why I don't want people to be like that. I don't want students to be like that. And I don't want soon-to-be teachers to be like that. I want you to be the agent of change. Change in the mind, changing the minds of ignorant people who do not understand that diversity itself is a beauty that we have to appreciate. And how can we appreciate beauty of diversity? By showing respect. That's the least that we can do, to show respect. What are the different forms of intercultural communication according to Jant 1998? One is interracial communication. I know it's very obvious, right? From the word racial. What do you mean by interracial communication? Any idea? What is an interracial communication? Anyone? What do you think? Okay, Mary Grace, go ahead.
Communication in different races, sir.
Okay, definitely. Communication between and among races. Okay, between and among races. Could be like if you are an online teacher teaching Chinese or teaching English to Chinese students, then communication between you and your Chinese student. I am an online teacher teaching English to Japanese students. And interestingly, the Japanese language does not have the sound of C. They don't have C in their language. That is why when you teach them the word city, for example, city, like the city, right? City. Most Japanese cannot pronounce it correctly. They would always say shitty, shitty. And you know how bad the word shitty is, right? Oh, that's shitty. So it's a bad word. So, you know, if you're not familiar with them, you would probably laugh at them saying shitty to city. Definitely. But if you realize that, hey, they don't have city, the sound C, they don't have C in their language. That is why they always mispronounce city into shitty. Then you would be able to understand that, it's because of their native language. And therefore, there is no reason for you to laugh at the person. Okay? Because that is part of their language. And you know, our first language has a strong influence on the language, the second language that we are learning. And in that sense, interracial communication is something like that, showing respect also to other races, right? So communicating with people from different races, okay? So probably in other countries like New Zealand or Australia, Monday is Monday, right? I just learned this, like the genuine in America, they would say genuine in British. So you can see differences in pronunciation, right? Fragile, fragile, something like that. So, you know, this kind of differences in pronunciation, if you're familiar with it, can really improve your global communication skills. Because here, we try to understand people. We try to understand their behavior. Why they behave that way, why they speak that way, why they act that way, why they think that way. And your understanding of the nuances of their culture would make you a global, an effective global communicator. That's very beautiful. So first is interracial communication. We also have the inter-ethnic communication. What do you mean by inter-ethnic communication? Interracial is about races. We also have inter-ethnic communication. So when you say inter-ethnic communication, interacting with people of different ethnic origins. Diba? That would be very difficult. The Igorots and the Bajaus communicating. Or, so the Bukidnons, for example, and the Maghats are communicating. So something like that. It would be very difficult, right? Well, us, we also have our own origin, right? Where probably if you are not born from, from a Filipino mom with an American dad, but still, even if you have that kind of origin, still, you would experience the inter-ethnic communication when you communicate with someone in a different ethnic group, right? So that could be very difficult still. But the goal here of communication is being able to convey your ideas. And the only way for you to do that is to show respect to someone. And by so doing, you would be able to engage in a meaningful, productive, and probably fun conversation, productive, relevant, fruitful conversation. So that's inter-ethnic communication. We also have that's a specific example of intercultural, interracial. We also have international communication. So from the word international, so we can say that communicating between representatives from different nations. Okay, I know you're familiar with the UN, right? And you're also familiar with the UNESCO, right? In the Philippines, we also have the ASEAN, right? Can you tell me the members of the ASEAN regions or ASEAN countries? Can you name at least 3 countries belonging to the ASEAN group?
Japan,
Japan is ASEAN?
Vietnam,
Okay,
Philippines, Malaysia,
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 Thailand, Indonesia.
Okay, these are ASEAN countries, right? So we have the Philippines, of course, Indonesia, we have Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. So these are countries belonging to. If you have watched the ASEAN game, I think ASEAN Games, that was last 2019, right? When we hosted the ASEAN. There were players from Vietnam coming to the Philippines. Laos, if you watch the live coverage of the ASEAN, it was interesting. So, which means that interacting representatives from different nations. Okay, so that would be fun experience if you become a representative of our country to join certain event in another country representing your country. Why is it really important for us to be able to understand how important it is to know international communication? Because we have interracial. We know interracial, but interracial is just between you and someone from another country, someone from another race. But international, it's about you representing your country and another person representing his country, which means that whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever you think, that already represents the kind of country you belong. That is why it's very, very crucial type of communication. Why? Because you are bringing with you the image, the entire image of your country. And what kind of Filipino image do you want to portray to the world? The kind of image that you are portraying to them defines the kind of people we are in the Philippines. And I think no one here in this room wants other country or wants other people think about us in a negative way, right? We want them to think that Filipinos are like this and that. We don't have to pretend. You don't have to pretend that we are like this and that, but showing respect, communicating your culture and understanding them with respect, communicating to them with respect is a manifestation of a true Filipino. Okay? So, the third is the intra-cultural communication. From the word intra, which means interacting with members of the same racial or ethnic group or co-culture. Okay, for example, me interacting to you. Okay, so that is inter or intra-cultural communication. Again, we belong to the same race, but again, we have different backgrounds. Your experiences are different from my experiences. My age is different from your age group. Your gender is different from mine. Our family backgrounds are also different. Our economic status may also differ. Our childhood experiences, if I may say, were also different from each other. So there are a lot of factors that actually affect intracultural communication. But again, I would like to repeat that the only way for us to establish effectiveness in communication, be it in intracultural communication, is through respect. Again, respect for others, respect for diversity, respect for individual differences. Now, with all these types of communication, we have the interracial, we have the one example is the interethnic, and we also have the international. We also have the intracultural. It's important that we know how to improve ourselves. Okay, improvement is the key. The reason why you are studying now, it's because you want to improve, not just your career in the future, your career path, your life in the future, but you want also to improve yourself. And the best way for us to improve ourselves is to continuously learn from people who have experiences that are relatable to us, or whose wisdom, whose expertise are worthy of emulation, worthy to be followed. So one way to improve is recognize the validity and differences of communication styles among people. What do you mean by recognize the validity and differences of communication styles among people? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by differences in communication styles, validity and differences in communication styles? Diba iba-iba tayo ng iba-iba tayo ng, kumbaga iba-iba tayo ng, sabi nga nila, idiosyncrasies, no? Yung iba, takot sa dilim, for example. Yung iba naman, takot sa ilaw. Oh. Yung iba naman, ganito, no? So, even with these little things, we differ, and we differ in many aspects. But how can we improve? It's to learn first of all, to learn the nuances. How do the Japanese communicate? How do the Americans communicate? Okay. There was one child from the Philippines who was brought by his mom to America to study. When he was in America, he did something wrong. The teacher scolded the child, and the child looked down on the floor. The American teacher was very mad, and the American teacher said, "Are you fighting back?" He said that. But you know what? The child was just manifesting, or is just manifesting, a very stereotypical Filipino child. Have you been scolded by your teacher before when you were still young? What's the usual action you do? Diba, when someone scolded us, or when someone scolds us, we always look down, right? As a sign of respect, or probably you're accepting your mistake. So probably in the Philippines, we have a different way of dealing with things, because in the US, if you want sincerity, or if you show innocence, if you don't show any rebellion on your teacher, for example, towards your teacher, you have to look at your teacher in the eyes pala. Dapat tingnan pala sa mata yung sa teacher. Titingnan dapat sa mata, no? If you don't want to fight back. But if you want to fight back, dapat tingin ka sa baba. No? That's fighting back pala sa kanila. So, you see, these simple nuance will really make like a big difference in the way we communicate with people. That's very important. Slurping, for example, when you eat noodles, that would be fine in Japan, right? But do not bring it here in the Philippines. When you eat in a restaurant, oh, okay, I'd like to order ramen because you went to a Japanese-inspired restaurant in the Philippines, and then you start slurping your food. That would, I mean, the noodles. That would sound weird in the Philippines, right? But that would be fine in Japan. So, which means that here, we have to recognize the validity and differences of communication styles among people. So we have to understand that. Okay? Some people would prefer to shake hands when you meet them. Others would prefer bowing. And there are other races that would even kiss you on the cheek when they greet you. So even in greetings, we have different ways. That's why we have to recognize first. The best way for us to do this is to research on the culture of the place you would be visiting. Do not go to a country in the future if you want to visit Asian countries, or if you want to go to China or Japan or Thailand, or if you want to go to Europe, or you want to go to Micronesian countries like Tonga or Papua New Guinea, Fiji. Always research the place first. Understand their culture, because that would make a difference in the kind of communication you will be giving them. Okay? So again, in the Philippines, we can negotiate on the price of goods, right? Especially if you are in the night market. How much is this? 100. That's too much. Can you sell it to me for 50 pesos? Oh, that's too much. That's too low. Let's make it 70. Oh, it's still high. Can you lower it down? So meaning to say, negotiation in the Philippines, especially when you buy something, is very common, right? But come on, do not bring that to other countries, especially in Japan, because they don't haggle for prices. If you do that, that is so rude. So which means that, differences in culture should be appreciated. Okay? And validity and differences of communication styles should be recognized. In that way, we would be able to understand why people think this way or why they act that way. So with this background we have, it would be easier for us to communicate. Another is to learn to eliminate personal biases and prejudices. Okay? So again, when you go to other countries, perhaps they don't take a bath in the morning. And in Japan, their taking a bath is different from our taking a bath. When they ask you, Junri, have you taken a bath? In the Philippines, taking a bath is just taking a shower, right? In the morning. But in their case, in taking a bath in Japan, the meaning of taking a bath there is actually taking a dip in the, they call it actually bathtub. So bathtub, they call it ofuro. Okay, ofuro is a bathtub in Japan. It's like an onsen that is in the house. They would always set the temperature to sometimes 45 degrees Celsius, and then they would mix something in it. You can take a dip there for 30 minutes, and that's taking a bath for the Japanese people. In the Philippines, it would be different, right? So, we have to eliminate personal biases and prejudices. Means that if their culture is different from our culture, it doesn't mean that one culture is superior while another is inferior. Don't say that, okay, in the Philippines we do this and that. So do not pretend that your culture is superior than the others. Okay? So there must always be respect, because with respect, there's always understanding. Right? Do not pretend that our culture is better than them, okay? And things like that. because I know that the Japanese people are always envious of the Filipinos, because to them, we could speak English very fluent, and they would say, how did you do that? I mean, how do you learn English so quickly? How did you learn English so quickly? We've been learning English since grade 1, and still we struggle with English. Why is it that Filipinos are really good at speaking English? Sometimes they would do that. So do not say that maybe our education is better than their, system of education, because if you look into the results of the TIMSS and the PISA, the Japanese people are doing well with the mathematics and science, even in reading and, in critical thinking. So, which means that we have to eliminate personal biases. Never use your own culture as a yardstick or a measure or a gauge in evaluating other cultures. Okay. They don't undergo circumcision. Oh, it's not good, something like that. Because that's their culture. You have to respect. If they don't do that, then it's fine. That's their culture. Again, do not make them fit your culture, because in that context, there will be no international communication. Third, strive to acquire communication skills necessary in a multicultural world. One way of doing that is to learn a language. There are a lot of apps now on Google Play and even on iStore that you can actually try. I was amazed that Duolingo can teach you a language. You can try installing that app in your phone, and you can play with games with Duolingo. It's very interesting app. Actually, I used that app with my Japanese FL students at Central Philippine State University. It was really amazing. So learning a language is one way for you to increase your skills in multicultural communication. Aside from that, you can also more or less research on YouTube or watch international movies and stuff like that. Learn their culture, not just the language, because learning the language or learning their culture would lead you to learning their language eventually. That's really nice. That's really nice. I mean, I was amazed because my students in the foreign language, most of them could speak little Japanese, but they learned casual Japanese. And I told them, you know what? That's very dangerous, because you speak in a very casual tone and casual language. When you speak with a teacher, for example, there is always a degree of honor and respect that you have to show. And therefore, it's very important that you speak with politeness and respect. So, it's very important for us to really acquire communication skills necessary in a multicultural setting by understanding someone's culture. And if possible, if you are a polyglot, probably if you are gifted with language ability, then it would be easy for you to learn a foreign language. And what fun it could be, okay? It could be more fun if you could learn languages, like other languages. Okay, so I have given you 5 tips here. One is to recognize validity and differences of communicating styles among people. Learn to eliminate personal biases and prejudices. Strive to acquire communication skills necessary in a multicultural world. My question for you is this. How would you improve your communication skills so that you would fit in a diverse and multicultural setting? How do we improve ourselves in your case? Okay, so that would be your assignment for next time. Assignment quiz, right? So we had already 3. I had given you 3. One is first is the individual note, followed by an individual note. Third is the meme, right? And the fourth one, I want you to prepare a commitment contract. Okay, so I will be sending you a template of the commitment contract that you will write there, I commit to do this and that in, let's say, in our semester will not last long, right? Usually every semester lasts only for like 5 months. So in 5 months' time, I want you to make a promise to me. What will you do for you to be able to increase your competence in global communication? Because our goal is to be able to communicate effectively in the global setting. So what promise can you give to yourself so that by the end of this course, you would be able to be a perfect, and not necessarily perfect, well, it would be difficult for us to achieve perfection in communication, but at least how could you improve your present self? How could you improve it in such a way that by the end of this term, you would be able to speak more confidently, more efficiently with a global audience? So in that contract, I want you to affix your signature, but of course, I will share with you the template first. You can modify the template. You can put your picture in there. Okay, you can put your picture in there and at the same time your signature. So again, let me just stop the recording. Okay, again,